Hi guys. Now, technology and value engineering. We've got an entire life cycle of building whatever asset class that happens to be, from design through to the operation and asset management. Where, in your experiences, do you most see the value being created for the implementation of technology, be that software or hardware, through the entire life cycle of a project? We'll start on the wrong end. We'll start with Paul, if you'd like to offer your view on the matter.
Yeah, thank you. Trimble, just talking about what we provide in the industry, we provide innovative solutions for the whole construction continuum. So it's hardware, positioning devices, integrated software solutions, collaboration platforms. So we're exposed across the spectrum in terms of where people are using our technology. Our motto is transforming the way the world works, and really what we're there to do is add value in terms of our solutions to the construction. Essentially what we're looking to do is transform the way we work in the construction industry, because we're a highly inefficient business, and that's one of the key drivers in the industry, is how we can improve our efficiencies and reduce our cost. So in terms of the different stakeholders that will be using our solutions, it can be from the very beginning, where we have people using it on infrastructure, or using it at the very start where they're mapping out the master plans, through to engineering, so using our different software applications to look at different types of scenarios of design with multi-materials, deploying that, and the biggest cost obviously is in the execution phase on any project. So that's where the cost of materials comes in, the cost of labor. Engineering only forms a very minor percentage of the cost. So how can we get that information to the site, and how can we actually manufacture whatever that project is in the most efficient manner? So we have companies that will use it in various phases. They'll try and automate their processes, and then deploy a mixture of both hardware and software, so we can get the information efficiently from the office through to the site, and then communicate back to the office on any changes that come up. So it's really every avenue of construction that we see the impact, and we're just here to try and make things better for the industry.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And Hibber, in your experience, where the value engineering technology side of things, and through the entire life cycle of a development from beginning to operations and maintenance, where's the value that you see being added in your world?
So I'm actually a structural designer, but I have done some work in the Internet of Things, so in instrumenting structures with sensors, and then trying to gather as much information as possible about the structure. So I see it as adding value in terms of adding knowledge that we know. As much as people think that with all these structures that we're building, we're going higher and higher and bigger, that we know everything about structures, we definitely do not. And so I see it as aiding in multiple aspects. First of all, for the designer himself, it's a good way to validate your design. As a developer, a lot of the time, as a developer or an owner, you get changes in the design that weren't anticipated. And so a lot of the time, there's a lot of abortive works that happen on site, because we don't know much about what's happening except what we have designed. So if we're changing the design, we are forced to go and change what's being constructed on site. But if we have information that is coming from the site in real time, we are able to avoid a lot of that, because sometimes as an engineer, as a designer, you have the sense that, no, you can't put more load on your structure, but you don't have any evidence to prove it. So that sense on its own is not enough. And that also goes back to authorities that are liable here, and they have to sign off on your design. If they can have more concrete information about the design that you have, about the loading that you have on your structure, they are much more comfortable signing off on it than just going based on the way design has been done for the past 50 years. We do have better materials now, but we just need to prove it on site. And overall, that carries over, so that's during the construction phase, if there are any changes, and to validate your design, but that carries over into the long term. So when we have maintenance, a lot of the time on infrastructure elements, particularly bridges, we just have scheduled maintenance. So every 5 years, you go out on the bridge and you change this and you change that, and it's supposed to function better. But if we have better information, and if we can prevent those issues before they arise, or maybe that maintenance is not actually required every 5 years. So if we have better information, we can schedule our maintenance in a way that reduces the cost of maintenance, and that justifies the cost of putting these sensors in the first place.
Okay, absolutely. And Fun, in your experience?
Well, yeah, I can add to what my panelists just said. It's all about a cycle. So when we look at a construction project, it's a cycle that starts by a design, and it has to go through all the way to finishing the project. So what the industry is facing, some discontinuity and lack of sharing of information. This is why we need things like the Internet of Things and the sensor to feed back this data. Yes, a designer might design something which can be applicable or not. He doesn't know what actually happens on site. So that technology communication flow to reach back what happened will help enhancing. And when you collaborate all the stakeholders, all the departments, all the way into every phase of the project, you can actually enhance what's been going on. This is why when we look at the industry, value engineering, and technology, we look mainly about sharing information and accountable information.
And how do you see getting that buy-in? Because here, as sort of Paul mentioned earlier, the level of inefficiency and we kind of, and as Hiba mentioned, we're just doing it the way we do for 50 years. There is an intrinsic tunnel a little bit with that. That's a challenge, would you?
It is a challenge. I mean, we see it every day that people are resistant to change. We have to change that mindset. The fact that we are doing something over and over for the past years doesn't mean we're doing it right.
Of course.
Or it doesn't mean it can be right, but doesn't mean this is the best solution. So we can have more enhanced, less costly, but beneficial solutions. This is why collaboration and communication is the essence of. Okay.
And so how, in your experience in the life cycle, what's technology doing that's driving a better process, as it were?
I think, let me just break it down a little bit. One is the project life cycle. If you see how we incur the cost on a project life cycle, is 20% is basically around the design and the construction, and the rest of the 80% is post the handover through the life cycle of it. But this 20% is so critical that it will have an impact on this 80%. So it becomes more important that we bring in all the value engineering possibilities here. Now, that's one side of the story. The second side of the story is resistance to the change. We all understand we want to do this value engineering. There is a lot of technology out there you can leverage today. The question always arises that my team is resistant, I don't have a proof, how do I know this is going to work? It's not what people are used to approving or reviewing. So we have been always questioning the evidence of these technologies and the possibilities it brought in, whether they were sensors or the big data or the cloud. Now with emerging role of artificial intelligence, I believe it's going to change, because for the first time in the history of these 60, 70 years of construction processes being documented, we have been building since the day we came on this planet. For these 70 years, we have built a lot. It was not that BIM was not there, we couldn't build the Leaning Tower of Pisa or Taj Mahal in India. All of these things have been built in past without all of these things, what we call technology. But that time also there was a technology. So artificial intelligence is going to play a key role, along with the cloud computing and robotics, to bring in the new ways of value engineering. Let me give you a few examples. If I'm able to really document the behavior of all the existing structures in UAE, how they have been behaving since last 3-5 years, and how they will be behaving in the next 5 years, I'm able to predict using artificial intelligence. That's going to build confidence for the designers like Hiba, who is going to say, okay, this is how the buildings have behaved. I captured this data, and now I'm simulating this. Now what artificial intelligence is going to do is, As a human being, I can simulate 1, 2, 3, 5, or 20 scenarios based on my experience and exposure. But imagine my co-partner, computer, AI, is able to simulate 100,000 options for me. And now I have a choice to prioritize. Out of these 100,000 options, I care about sustainability. That should be the priority 1. I care about my client's cost. That's my priority 2. Can I reduce the time of handover? That's my priority 3. The AI will bring this down to probably 100 or 50 options. So that's the new emerging role of technology, I believe, is going to come out and change the way we have been doing value engineering in the past.
Okay. And Kamal, in your experience, where's technology been of good utilization, or in your experience, where has it been best implemented? Because I know you're coming at it from a fit-out perspective, and where do you see the future with it?
Right, so if I may, I'll introduce myself. My name is Kamal Farah. I'm the CEO of Avanos. We're one of the largest fit-out and joinery companies in the UAE and the Middle East. We operate out of 21,000 square meters of facilities in Dubai, and we're constantly upgrading ourselves in terms of machines and software. Now, from where I'm sitting, I see a word revolution here, industry revolution. It's not industry revolution, it's industry evolution. One of the speakers earlier, he said, we're always talking about the same thing. We are always talking about the same thing, but that's a good thing. That means that we're evolving. With the technology that we have today, and what we are trying to do, especially in our company, is to capture data, use that data, and analyze that data. That's what we do as engineers. We capture data, we use that data, and we analyze that data, and then we evolve from there. With the technology that we have today, it's much easier to access that data much quicker, as you've heard from Hiba. From an engineering point of view, a structural engineering point of view, I studied structural engineering, you can get that data much quicker. You can act faster. From a construction point of view, you reduce the costs because there is less wastage in terms of time, in terms of material, and you're able to act much quicker. It helps us in a big way. And we continuously use this information to see how to continuously evolve.
Okay, and when you're gathering all of this information, you're implementing all of this new technology, I mean, what's your process in sort of selecting that? Because there is a whole new raft of worlds of different types of technology that's at different stages of development. How do you go, in terms of running your business, from a business question, it's interesting because you're an implementer of some of the ideas that we've heard. How do you go around assessing what all of that noise is going to do to help your business drive forward?
You know, it's a very interesting question because, as you said, I'm the only one on this panel who's not an technology, who's not a provider of technology. I am an implementer of technology, but there are so many different technologies out there. There's so many different software out there. You have software we utilize software for planning, for estimation, for especially, you know, because we're a specialized contractor in joinery. So we have a specialist software for creating cutting lists. There are a couple out there, and you have to weigh the pros and cons because some of them come from the machine providers, some of them come from an independent party. And we use all this technology, and the thing is you've got to see how to collaborate this technology. You have different technology for different processes. Yep. As I said, you know, planning, costing, cost control, cutting lists, you know, software, all these special. You have to see how to put them together. That's where the secret is.
Yep.
But
okay.
there is a lot out there, and it depends what you want to use it for.
Okay, and I mean, with that, I mean, a sort of question throw out quickly, really sort of Paul's direction is, how do you help people justify these investments as a software implementer? So the software boys here, please, because I can tell you, I've had arguments already in my new role about return on investment and capital cost of investment, etc. How do you go around this demonstrating? Because I get very excited about the AI and the Internet of Things right now. But it's an investment, and I've seen a lot of. We're evolving. Can you explain how? Because we've had this argument before.
Lots of discussions. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's our job as innovators of these solutions is to justify and get the interest of our audience that we're talking to. I think that primarily looking at the customer base and the people that you're talking to is that they're looking for a return on investment. First and foremost, obviously that's price is always something that comes into it. And what we need to leverage is, not just focus on the initial investment, but, why do you want the technology in the first place? What's the usage that you're going to apply with that technology? How can you what's the betterment for the project itself? Who's driving that decision? If we look at a lot of tenders that kind of come out nowadays, they're quoting high level of development, and they're looking for projects that can have usability going into the future. So we're looking at FM as well. So at the outset, a lot comes down to the project that you've got, what level of information you need to embellish into that project, the metadata, the usage for that data in the future. So that's going to be firstly, it's going to be what's the case use of the particular software that you're looking at. Efficiency, we develop software and hardware explicitly for efficiency in the food chain, let's say. So, when we develop software, we don't just go and develop it for one use. We're really selling that to the company so they can be more efficient. Otherwise, there's no value in them investing. So when we look at the traditional processes, and I've been in the industry a few years. I started out many years ago in a traditional role, 30 years back. And how technology has changed over the course of that period is amazing. But quite often people lose sight because everything has advanced so far nowadays that we're kind of trying to make processes that little bit more faster and faster. So, one solution compared to the other may develop the same level of efficiency nowadays in how we produce a design. Yeah. We're talking about maybe minutes of difference in technology, but the process is really one key element. You can buy lots of different softwares, but if they are not interconnected, then you don't have a process. You're working in silos. So the other aspect is openness in terms of our technologies, and the collaboration side is a key to that as well. Once you go from that, the philosophy of digitization, and you end up having to go back into, printing out a drawing and then taking that out on site, you've lost that efficiency. You've thrown in more potential for errors and more potential for delays. So softwares that can maintain throughout the life cycle in a digital format is something that we're trying to sell to the customer. It may be more costly, but for the life cycle of that project and the life cycle of your process, it's going to be much more efficient as you go on and save you much more money overall. So hopefully that kind of answered it in...
Yeah, absolutely. Have you two gents got...
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. It's all right. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that if we look to the construction industry, it's the most complicated among all other industries. And yes, there are a lot of softwares out there, but construction doesn't follow a logic like banking system or retails, etc. It has a lot of what if else connection, and it's a collaboration between departments such as design. We're talking about people on site. We're talking logistics, accounting. So different departments talking on different languages. And that, when we look at software, we don't look at software that can fit to a specific department. We have to look to collaboration tools where we can combine every stakeholder, every active person on a site, so to share the information as we spoke earlier.
if I may add, you asked me the question earlier, what do I look for when choosing a software? Is the openness of the software. How easy is it to integrate that software with our in-house ERP systems and the software that we develop in-house? Because we do develop our own software in-house. And it's very important from a management point of view to make sure that the software that we buy is open enough that we can integrate it with the different softwares that we have in our company, in order for us to be at that forefront in giving the best quality of service and material.
I think, let me just start from what Kamal said. In good old days, you could get a demo done for the customer and they would say, okay, now software cost is not easy, it's an investment. And people have to choose it and invest wisely. So what we have been doing in Autodesk in the last good number of years, like I think 5-7 years, we have been building something called Technology Innovation Centers. We have got one in Birmingham, one in San Francisco, another in Boston, where they are really like, in Boston, it's like a construction site. So all our customers walk in there and they get to see how this model from my building information model of the building is going into the CNC machine and getting produced. How this bridge is going to be built in each of these components. Or we did a case study with Airbus where we helped them to do the legs and the partitioning board and reduce the weight by 30 or 45% of the actual weight which is today. And if you really translate that in terms of numbers for any airline, it's a huge multi-million-dollar savings for them. And same is the case we did with one company in Amsterdam who wanted to do a 3D printed bridge, excuse me. And the idea was the design had to come from artificial intelligence and generative design. So they worked with us and we worked with them as the coexisting. It was not about really, here is the software, leave it with it. It was about really proving the value of it because it's new, it's an investment. And we are seeing a huge convergence of the lines blurring between the manufacturing and the construction. And we are not very far from the day when we will see at least a good number of the buildings are being manufactured off-site than built on-site. So we will have to start thinking of how automotive companies over the past 2 decades have been able to become efficient and do value engineering. So those are the processes we have to start inheriting in our construction process.
Okay.
Again, if I may add, what you're talking about is the implementation of a lean approach in our industry, in the construction industry, and with your software. We had a lean course recently in the company, and there was a very interesting video that we were shown, and it was of how quickly they changed the Formula One car, the tires in the Formula One cars. And they showed us a sort of video clip from the beginning, from the 1960s till now. It took them 10 minutes in the 1960s. Now it takes them 1 second. And it's through using all these different softwares and integrating them that we are able to become more lean, because we're able to get access to data much quicker. The human mind only thinks, at a certain speed, and we can only access information, at a certain speed. And, we have more in cubby holes, whereas the computer is able to get that information much quicker and act much faster.
So it's basically, do you want data or you want an insight? So in past, we have been looking at more on the data. Now data, because of sensors, because of all these automations and these devices all over the places, the data has become so huge. Sometimes to translate that to a usable piece of information or insight, it is a big investment of time or resources. Now, the question is how quickly you can have the access to that insight or that piece of information which is going to drive that decision.
Can I answer your question?
Sure.
It depends on the hardware that you invest in, because it's also very important to capture that data, and how quickly you can capture that data and how efficient you can capture that data really drives that process, helps you in driving that process. And we are constantly evolving in developing this hardware for capturing that data. It's all out there, but you've got to know what you're looking for. and what you want to capture.
So the question is, do we know what we are looking for, or do you want to know what's the kind of investment you are talking about when you want to have this kind of software in place? Is that the question?
No,
Okay.
if that's the question, I have the answer. The answer comes with experience. Now, sorry to talk about ourselves, because I have to give examples. As a company, we've been around for the last over 40 years, and you get the experience of what you're looking for. You know what to look for in the market that you're working in. So from that experience, you know what data you want to capture. So if there's, Hiba, for instance, she's talking about capturing structural data from structural elements to see how to design the structure and to maintain the structure, which is very important in the life cycle structure.
That's actually quite a good point. So we speak a lot about construction. Obviously we're talking about life cycle because there's been such a zoned in focus on the cost of something to actually build it. And because you're in the design, are you starting to see the life cycle sort of conversation coming in and the implementation of technology for life cycle? Because people historically haven't paid any attention particularly to the 70-80% cost of the actual life of the project. You mentioned that authorities were starting to feel more comfortable because of the utilisation of this hardware, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the clients are necessarily implementing it. In your experience, have you started to see that coming through?
So actually, just to give you a background, I lived in the US for 5 years, and I worked there on the maintenance of bridges, and that's where we started this research on sensors and all that. And there's more attention to this because a lot of their bridges are deficient. A lot of these bridges were built in the 50s and 60s and now need to be maintained, and some of them they're worried about failing any minute. And so when you come back here, everything is still new and you forget about these issues. You think if you build it right, it should be fine. And so there's, I think to convince people, to go back to your question, to convince people of the cost, these sensors cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and people don't want to pay that money up front. But then I think you can go back to case studies from other places. So maybe we don't have this problem here. But if you just tell them in the future it will be helpful, that is a very broad statement. And people don't want to pay when they don't know what they're getting. But if you give them an example, for example, we have specific case studies that have been published in academic journals and others that actually show the cost of instrumenting a bridge versus the value that you get from that. And over 20 years, for example, you can recover that investment and more. Plus, if you put a price on the failure that could happen, that is also a cost that you're saving, which is harder to measure. So I think we can get our case studies from a lot of different places outside the UAE. For example, in Singapore, there's actually a requirement by the authorities there to instrument any high-rise structures. Okay. And they classify, I think, high-rise there above 20 stories. And so we can learn from that because they've been doing that for 15 years. So we can see what kind of information they've gotten, what kind of technology they've used, and how we can improve on that. And then based on that, we can justify using these things here.
So when we start to look at, we're not particularly great in terms of implementation of new things because we are a very inefficient industry by and large. Do you think there's a mandate that needs to come through to help this along in like the Singapore example that you give? Because sometimes that's the only way to drive this kind of change. We've heard about wonderful early adoption, but it's not necessarily come all the way through. So to justify that, you talk about the authorities being receptive. Do you think it may have to be mandated from that level?
I think so, because I think it could be helpful because, for example, for sustainability, they started requiring a certain percentage of recyclable materials to be used in concrete to try and be more sustainable. Yep. And I think if they hadn't made that requirement, we would be a long way from there. It's very hard to convince the contractors, it's very hard to convince the owners, but if there's a mandate and if it's for the general public good, then I think it could be useful. So I think if we are unsuccessful in approaching the clients themselves, if there's a question of safety, then we can approach the authorities. But I think when it's a question of value engineering, at least in the short term, so if you can prove savings in the construction phase, I think the owners are very receptive. If it's a question of maintenance and things that go beyond what they're looking at right now, I think then we might need intervention from authorities.
And a question I've got for all really is that how we've we speak about inefficiency within the industry. I mean, we're talking about adoption, and Kamal here is obviously a very keen adopter of these of new technology. But there is a skills and training gap there. Where are we addressing that in terms of delivering in the value engineering process? Because if you invest in this technology, how do we ensure that it's getting some kind of value out? Because you can justify it by doing a return on investment argument, but there's a gap in terms of knowledge. I can say that across any business I've looked at in general. I mean, how are you? It's probably more a software developer, hardware developer's question, because there are problems with that. You can buy it and it ends up on a shelf, or it doesn't get used again, and that's not return on investment for a technology.
So, yeah, I think one thing as a developer and provider of solutions is that what we are doing and cognizant of the usability is making softwares a lot easier and user friendly. We can have thousands of features in software, but if they're not utilized, then what's the point at the end of the day? So we're looking at developing interfaces, almost like apps, and we have apps that work on mobile devices that get used very frequently. If we create something similar to Facebook where you click on that and people are using it every hour. It's interesting to see how many people use those social apps, but develop interfaces that are extremely easy to use, that are very graphical, that have lesser options, because the more options you have, then the more training you require to train the people how to use those. We've got technologies today that we're also talking about language barriers. So we're the vast labor force that we have, in the Middle East. The skill sets we've got to cater to those different skill sets and be able to have solutions that enable them to easily pick up the software. As soon as you get that adoption, then obviously you're changing the process and you're changing the industry. We have examples where we've taken solutions, field link technologies, where we've got hardware, where we're driving a robot, a total station on site, that are doing positioning, but the training, there's a language barrier, so non-English speaking country, but the user interface is so easy that by effectively sign language, you can point, say, press this, this, and this, and the person then picks up, that technology and is able to go forward with it. So that's really from our vendor side to the industry, coming up with unique and user-friendly solutions is how we have the biggest impact to adoption and what I would call the stickability of the software into the company.
Okay.
Investment in technology is not just about software and hardware. There is a second investment that we need to do is on our people. So I'll go back to the data and insight example. We need to transform this data into insight. So we need to get the knowledge. And knowledge is not only through systems that are predicting and doing analysis. We need the human interaction. We need the logic that we possess as human and the decision making. I want to go back to what Kamal was saying previously about in-house implementation and design. This is a tricky part where some people think they are doing innovation by digitizing their own process. So we're transforming paperwork into designing our own software to fit the process. But we're not enhancing the software, we're just digitizing it. And this is what we tried to do over 40 years in CCS. So we designed the knowledge throughout all the customers around the world. So we were taking the knowledge from consultants, from contractors, engineers, etc., to implement an off-the-shelf software that can help you to enhance your process, not just going digital, but going through the proper process of the business. And this is where we work on training the people and getting the information. So this is, just wanted to add on.
So David, back at Autodesk, we look at it a little differently. One is really to make sure that our software is adopted. Another is the responsibility towards the industry. So for the first part of it, we have got a huge network of resellers and academic partners, basically authorized training centers, which we personally spend a lot of time training them so that if a company buys a software, someone is there to help them immediately and help them drive that adoption. I just want to warn everyone that does not mean that that just solves the problem. There has to be a change mindset within the organization and a strategy to do that. But the other part, in the terms of the long term, what Autodesk is very carefully investing in is in our education program. We have a strong education program back at Autodesk where we contribute voluntarily, and there's a dedicated team to do that. Which basically does is, first was to make sure all the academia, the teachers and the students and everyone involved in academia does not have to worry about how much is this software going to cost. We give them access to it. All of our portfolio, they can just use it free as long as they are in academia. Second, we started involving the academia within us and our experts back in Autodesk to build these curriculums. So we have designed curriculums for how to do concept design, how to do sustainability, and all of these kind of things. And we are working with them and giving them access to it. So we might not have the stopgap for everything. This gap is large today. But as you start seeing the new engineers and architects coming out of these institutions, you will see they will have the knack and experience of these softwares. How do they use these new technologies, irrespective of where the vendor and who is providing the software, they will be having this understanding of how do I use this value engineering softwares to drive value during the design or the construction or post handover. Basically, that's how we see it at Autodesk, and that's where we invest in.
Okay, so it's an investment in people. I mean, clearly this is something that you've been doing quite seriously, because you look like quite a forward-thinking technological organisation from where I'm sitting.
We like to continuously educate our people in the software that we buy. Otherwise, we're buying something, as you said, it goes on the shelf. I think it's very important from a managerial point of view that has to go right down through the organisation, which is what we try to do. We try to educate our people on how to use the software that we have bought. And in doing that, we buy them into the process through educating them. And we're finding that it works.
Okay. I can't remember the author of this quote, but I think to really say this, and I personally believe as an employee or as a person who works for a company, there was this quote I read once that said, the CFO was telling the CEO basically, you are going to invest on this person, what if he leaves tomorrow, right? And the CEO says, what if I don't do this and he stays?
Yeah.
Right, so I appreciate what Kamal said.
This
investment is required not only on the software and the hardware side. I think the most critical part of the investment which companies have to start looking at seriously is investing into the people and enabling them to do this kind of new ways of bringing value.
I completely agree with you, and not throw you under the bus here, but not saying anything bad about you, but there is also something else that we have to take into consideration when we buy the software, which is the help desk that there is behind the software. If ever we have a problem, we need to have someone here that we call, say, well, there's a problem here, we don't know what's going on, and for someone to come to come and to help us. And I think that is becoming more and more, a lot of the software providers realize this, that it's not just something that you buy and you put on the shelf and you tell them, right, go and use it. You need training, you need a help desk, you need a troubleshooter to help you solve all the problems.
Okay. And the motivation.
Sorry?
And the motivation.
And
people are not robots. If you're going to tell them just do this and click that, they're not going to be involved. But when you train them and give them that access, they are more motivated because they can see the effect of their work.
I will give you a little insight. There is a problem, especially in this part of the world, in that there are so many different people from so many different countries, and someone will tell you this is a bottle of water. Someone will tell you this is water with water in a bottle. So I've just defined this in two different ways. There are so many different ways of defining things that you find that there's a problem in implementing the software here, and that's where the problem lies. A lot of that. So we have to standardize everything in the software that we buy. in order for people to get motivated to use it more and educate them.
Okay. So when we look at adoption today, and we've started to address some of the challenges, and we're looking at technology as it stands. Where do we, as a sort of final discussion points, where do we see the next wave of being able to implement technology for the life cycle of value engineering through design, construction, and indeed asset management, and what's the net benefits to the average layman or layperson in an organisation who's going to have to sort of buy into this and implement it? So anyone want to take the thoughts as to what's next and what the benefits are likely to be for the whole process? Because we've got software, we've got some hardware, we've got a life cycle, and where do we go from here? There's forward thinking for the final piece, and just see where do we think we're going to be in 2, 3, 4 years' time as we start to look at other modes of implementation in technology. So you mentioned, I'll pick on Suhail a little bit because you mentioned artificial intelligence earlier. Is that all the next big thing, and is it standalone?
I don't think artificial intelligence is still a distant future. It's now. It's happening. It's just the volume of it. What I foresee now, we have like 9 billion people going to be on the planet very soon. We have cost constraints. We have environmental constraints. I think one big change which is going to happen in the coming years very soon is value engineering is not going to be a standalone topic. It's going to be questioned right from the concept stage. And because of all of these constraints which are going to drive this behavior. Today, it's predominantly driven by budget. And if you go to the history of value engineering, it goes from the World War II when they wanted to substitute things which they were not available without disrupting the end value to the user. But in this case, the same constraints are now going to change this behavior. And that's where I personally believe is going to drive the adoption of these technologies and the need for these technologies. Which basically means I need something to do this faster and better because that's my requirement. We have to deliver infrastructure for 9 billion people, but at the same time, we have to be conscious about the environment. We cannot be doing the things we have been doing in the past. These constraints will drive that behavior of requirement of the new ways and new tools. And artificial intelligence, cloud computing, robotics, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be looking them as tools rather than a threat. If I can design faster and efficiently, why not? If someone can execute faster, why not? It is going to disrupt us a lot sooner than we think. They are here, but if we adopt and use them as we want them, they are going to be our biggest friends for humanity in coming forward. This is where I see. So these 3 things will change the value engineering forever in the construction industry. The artificial intelligence, cloud computing, which is going to translate all this massive data into insights and facilitating every construction professional to make decisions efficiently and faster. And the last is the robots. These robots are going to make things possible for us which were costing us a lot in past because of insurance, security, health, and everything. Because now you can throw in a robot and do some things which you couldn't do impossibly in past. So this is what I believe in.
Okay. Yeah, I'd mirror Suhail's comments there on where things are going in terms of technology and value engineering. We already are seeing that and developing autonomous solutions now. We have in the agricultural industry, and obviously you've lived in the US, but agricultural, very big over there. We have farm machines that will drive and scanning devices that will, from satellite telemetry, will scan the crops to say this crop is ready to reap, this one needs pesticides, and then that information is translated back down digitally into the autonomous machinery that will then go through these fields and reap and sow the fields. This technology is being applied into construction as well. So if we've got areas where you've got dangerous environments to go into, now robots can actually do the work. If we look at in areas where we've got a lot of, if you're doing the construction at the beginning of the phase in terms of the grading technologies there to take the information and efficiently tell the operator of the machine where he needs to be, doing the grading and not moving earth from one place to another, because quite often you'll see when you go to a site, they'll dig a pile of sand and then they'll move it to one place, and then later on they'll decide, well, actually I need to use this area, so they'll drive that grading machine and the JCB, and they'll go and dig that up and move it to another place. If we look at the inefficiency and also the sustainability, in terms of the long-term future, this is kind of the big drivers that we have in the Middle East. We've got reduce, get more sustainable in over the next few years as a mandate. So there's going to be lots of different aspects. And then on the other technology side, cloud computing is becoming, as I said earlier, it's more app-based nowadays, so it's all in the cloud. And then we've got different applications of information reading technologies, going to site with AR and VR and mixed reality, so that you can have people extract information just by visualizing what's going on site.
Okay. I mean, with that, I've acknowledged we've come to the end of our session. So on that matter, I'd like to thank you all very much. And please, ladies and gentlemen, do show your appreciation to the panel.
David, just before we close the session, if there are any questions from the stage, if you don't mind. I believe we have one in the back over there.
Thank you very much. My name is Jubair. Again, I'm a colleague of Ismail from Wassel. I just want to make a statement first, and then I'll issue a question. I believe the panel will agree with me that value engineering involves evaluation, optimization, analysis. And in this, it involves data, information, and factuals. And in this, involves unknowns. You cannot have data without unknowns. Now, once you have unknowns, there is a risk. Now, if you agree with me, I would like to ask two questions to the panel. Is integration of risk management and value engineering important? And if yes, how could the risk management softwares be utilized for achieving the best values in the value engineering management?
Thank you. Any takers?
Everybody's looking at me? All right. Yes, I completely agree with you. And the second fold of answer is, how do we look at these risk management softwares actually playing the role into this new world? Currently, there's a set of scenarios. If you look at most of the risk management softwares, when they highlight risk, or even the professionals, when they look at it from the experiences, and there's a set of rules which you are able to simulate. What I see in future, this is going to be an evolving thing. The new set of softwares cannot be just what a software team or that particular time the industry was aware of, and it's being written, the hard-coded in. The new set of the softwares which are coming already from most of our camps are going to be evolving, which will be learning from as the new risks were identified based on the material or the behavior or the locations, and it will be learning and evolving as we move forward. What I personally believe is, think of it this scenario. I am worried about yesterday. A few years back, I would be confident enough to tell anyone, do you know what? Why I'm saying this? Because I have this number of years of experience under my belt, and that's what makes me confident to say it or qualified to say it. I don't think we will be able to say that going forward. The next generation of engineers and architects or the professionals who are coming in have got access to all of our experience put together because of all these technologies which are emerging. So that's going to be needing a different set. I cannot tell them because I have 10 years of experience, they are going to say, please shut up. I have 300 years of experience, not only from Middle East, but from China and US and UK. So you just shut up. It's like, I have my notebook and he has a Google. So we have to really buckle up. And they are really our future. They are writing our future, and they have access to all this inside. So your risk management software is not going to look same what it looks today. It has to be evolving, and it has to be learning.
So just building on what you just said, Suhail, and you know, Kamal was talking earlier about evolving rather than changing. Hiba, you've mentioned data collection, having enough information so you can set up your periodic inspections and that kind of thing. As of today, where are we with implementing technology for value engineering?
Well,
Fadi, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we are way behind on the invention. I mean, it will be mentioned in the presentation in a bit, but construction industry has less than 1% of revenue spent on technology innovation.
Less than 10%?
Less than 1%.
Than 1%. Why is that?
People are afraid to pay money. They want to finish the project, stay on budget, spend less.
But I heard that we've got plenty of softwares. You guys have been talking about softwares all day long. What happened?
Cheap softwares, maybe they don't want to invest on a solution. They invest on a particular standalone software. They look at the digits. They look at the end. How much am I going to pay? They don't think on the return of investment. They don't think that software is going to minimize the work that my people are going to do. Therefore, they're going to do more. They only think from the part how much I'm going to pay, and I'm paying salaries, etc. So it's about how much I'm going to lose from my bank account.
I think fundamentally it comes down to the regions that you operate in. So if you look at Europe, which is high expense, high salaries, high cost of living, like the US, they're more willing to invest in technology because they know that technology is going to reduce the cost. So I can reduce my labor force and I can be more efficient.
Yep.
Over here, because the cost of labor is much less, then the cost of investment, innovation becomes much less, and we bid the jobs. You only really see it on the mega projects where they really say this is technology driven and this is where we need to invest the money. And mega malls that are coming up now, we've heard in the earlier panels today, they've invested heavily in technology because there's huge malls where they have to deliver on time. We've got the Expo 2020 coming up. They have to invest in technology because there's a deadline, and that deadline has to be met. So they've got no choice. But for the general construction, investment becomes a secondary factor, and that's where we have to come up with convincing people there's a reason for investing.
Excellent. Sorry, Dave.
No problem. No worries. Any further questions?
Oh, we have a question here.
So this gentleman here.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, please.
Sorry, we've got one in the back. Just one second.
Hi, Liam Darrett from Ecom.
Okay.
I'm all for technology, but is the real issue not transparency? It's only as good as information we put in it. Yeah. We're actually going to roll out virtual construction sites, much like Google Street View for construction, so anyone can see what's going on in a project at any one point in time. But it's transparency, yeah? What can we do differently to change people's mentality to make sure we are all transparent? There's no hiding place for anyone. I think that would go a long way to resolve a lot of our issues in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what can we do to basically get the data in? Because as best as I understood it, the data, the reporting, that's everything else is only good as the information coming in, and there's the transparency problem that goes with that. So, what in terms of technology could we potentially do to improve that? Anybody's got a view on that particularly?
Please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say something on the other side. We cannot be fully transparent. There's safety issues, right? There are a lot of different issues involved here, but if we can expose the vulnerabilities of our structures, that would be catastrophic. And also this data can fall in the wrong hands. It can be translated in the wrong way. You can come out with information. I mean, it's all statistics at the end of the day, and Suhail knows more about that. So I think there is an issue. We do need to balance out how transparent we can be. We cannot just release all of this data for the public to be able to use. And I'm sure you have more to add.
Well, yeah, I was going to look more on the contractual side of how we operate here in the Middle East. So, having lots of conversations with major contractors in the region, One of the discussions I was having was that, we have information, technology in terms of we can have a high level of information already provided. Wouldn't it be good to have that? And it was more a case of, well, if I put more details in there, I become more liable. So the industry as a whole and how the contracts are written need to be looked at in terms of, how are we going to be working? If you look at the US, they work on IPD, Integrated Project Delivery, which is shared risk for everybody. So it's very transparent, and that's really for the benefit of the owner of the project, and everybody's having a shared risk and shared profits. Here it's a bit more contentious.
Adversarial.
Yeah.
Just to add what Paul said, unfortunately when contracts started in the world, they started with the fact or the notion in behind, who do we penalize when there is a fall, right? I think the time has come, we have to start looking at the contracts at how do we reward everyone when we save. That's my thing I can say.
David, if you don't mind, one last question before we close the session.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, they can hear you.
Going back to Fadi's point about the 1% investment in technology, and I'm happy to see all of you guys are solution providers except for Kamal. Kamal, you're not a solution provider, and you are investing in technology. Can we know why you're investing in technology? Everybody's saying Europe and the US, and you're focusing, you said you have 40 years of experience in Dubai, and you are investing in technology. Can you explain why? What's the rationale behind that investment?
Look, we need to be it's very important that as a company we have a reputation of being transparent to start off with, of working in a team to deliver the project. And we want to be at the forefront of the industry. In order to be at the forefront of the industry, we have to invest in that technology. There's no other way about it. I've sat in meetings and I've told people, listen, enough is enough, we're going to do it now. And we've had to force it to happen. And it does happen. But as I said, it has to come right down through the chain of the company. It doesn't come one person, like, we do it and then that's it. It has to come down through the chain. It is very important. And it is very important for transparency. And I think, we value, when we take a project on, we value the project more than we value ourselves. I mean, we've delivered projects where we've lost money, but we've had to deliver the project. Because at the end of the day, our reputation's on the line. And you don't get repeat business unless your reputation is good. So, I think it's very important in being at the forefront of the industry, in investing in technology.
Okay. Sorry. Please.
About to say, if you look at the construction from a contractor point of view, what's the key challenge? It's always about cost control. We can build a reputation by paying for the building on behalf of the client, but we're losing money. So at the end, we need to get our profit. So we need to compare our budget, maintain it, preserve it, and compare it to the cost. We need to invest on technology so we can have the real-time access to information. We don't want to see we're losing money at the end of the project. We want to see it on a day-to-day basis so we can control it. This is where we have the risk analysis. This is where we mitigate any problem. And if we go back to the transparency, I just want to add that there's a problem, we see it in this part of the region, is contractors are afraid to, if you want to say, just put more information out there because of competition. So they think, one employee is going to steal those information and give it to someone else, and that's a fact. But we're limiting ourselves, so we need to have more technology or access.
Thank you, Fadi. David, please.
On that note, we'll finish the panel, and I'd like to thank our participants and please show their gratitude.